my obligation, and the one that I really have always wanted and look forward to make sure that Miami establishes those standards and that culture. And mind you, standards and culture are action. Okay? You don't just roll the ball out there and become Michael Irvin.
A lot of people think they are. I might be in that camp as well. I am bullish on the Hurricanes this year. Hello and welcome to Always College Football. Today is Thursday, June 6th, and we hope that you've had a terrific start to the week. We have a great way to cap off our week's worth of shows with a visit with Mario Cristobal. We're going to talk about the expectations. I mean, everybody knows they're improved. Vegas has acknowledged that they're one of the most improved teams in the sport. You look at their talent. There's no reason why they can't make a run this year. We're going to talk a little bit about the game in week one, about the Florida Gators. That game is coming up. We're going to talk about the addition of Cam Ward and some of the other guys in the portal and the culture that's been created there at Miami in his first 2 years. So a lot that we need to get to. And because Miami's on the show, we decided we'd dive in to a couple of bounce back teams this year. We selected 5. There's probably more. TCU is one. Nebraska's one. There's a few others that might have underwhelmed in 2023, but could look at 2024 as a significant opportunity to bounce back and have an outstanding season. So let's not waste any time. Let's get to it. We have Mario Cristobal, the head coach of the Miami Hurricanes, joining us next on Always College Football. Coach, it's always so great to visit with you, and we've made note multiple times off last year's team. I know we're not looking back, but I felt like there was so much progress made from year one to year two. It might not have been reflected in wins and losses, but it felt like you guys were so close on so many different occasions. So collectively inside the building, did you feel like massive leaps were made from year one to year two?
Absolutely, and we felt that going into the season, and we knew that we could compete. We could. We went from a roster in year one that was going to be difficult to be competitive against the higher level teams on a weekly basis, but worked hard. Certainly had a great offseason, and it felt like every game we had an opportunity to win, or at least take it into overtime, whatnot. And for the most part, it worked out that way. Came up short sometimes, and sometimes found a way to get it done. And I felt like the progress has never stopped. Systematically, we found ourselves in the in 22 in the 90s and hundreds, and last year, for the most part, a lot of our statistically, offensively and defensively in the top 25 and top 30. So some really good progress, and a lot more progress to be made. And that's what our focus has been all offseason.
I can't give too much love to Shannon Dawson, Coach. I just can't. He's my boy, so I just can't give him too much. But yes, you guys did go from 85th offensively to 25th last year. But the one area that I feel like, even though it got better from year one to year two, it was the turnovers. It was the turnovers, the timely turnovers that just were catastrophic. We're not going to focus on any in particular, but how do you make sure that guys stay aggressive while also at the same time, hey, we don't need to take that chance at that time of the game? So how do you balance that as a head coach?
Well, it's like, as you pointed, it was probably the number one area that requires improvement. And that overlapped a little bit with our red zone issues as well. Yeah. We had some really good success early on, and then we had our struggles as the season went on. So you look at it from a turnover, a penalty standpoint, a red zone standpoint, and then third downs. We were hot and cold. Okay. But those 4 things, if those 4 things could launch us into a top 10 operation, offensively and defensively. So from a turnover standpoint, you know how it is, man. You have to have guys that you can trust to get it done, but you got to work them into a mentality that they can't be trusted, into a physical state where they understand that there is nothing more important than the ball. So we've done that, and there's countless ways, right? You've been drilling since you've been a kid and playing football, and then you just got to get it done. You've got to present challenging situations, put them in it, and see if they could do it. And sometimes you got to find out in the game and if they can. And we feel really good about the progress we've made there in the offseason. Now it's got to show up on game day.
Well, it's amazing the way you just continue to attack If there's a player to be recruited, you're on him. Whether it's at the high school level or the college level via the portal, you guys just continue to fortify your rosters at positions, not even necessarily positions of need, positions of strength. But hey, you know what? He's a player. He can help us. We'll take Damian Martinez. So when you evaluate guys that you want to add, what are the boxes that need to be checked?
Oh, you know the critical factors because you were part of that operation as well. Those things haven't changed, and those critical factors have always stood the test of time. And at the end, once all those boxes are checked, they have to be a great locker room fit, right? Mentality's got to be on point. I mean, it can't be an agenda-driven, independent contractor. I know you've heard that word before, back in the day, but it's got to be that way. And what we've, fortunately for us, because it helps you. Every job, albeit one, Alabama, every job was a rebuild. So there was such a focus on you've got to change the roster. You've got to overhaul the roster. You've got to overhaul really everything, the coaching staff, recruiting department, strength room, everything. And until you're in that situation, you don't realize how it's not a desperate thing. It's just a really urgent feeling for us to accomplish what we have to accomplish, to do what we want to do. We've got to be able to have the right pieces in place. And that's a relentless process because you can't have one here and a hole on this side, right? And you can't have one here and layered here well and then have no depth and let that bottom fall out. So that in itself is, that process is almost like a process on top of all the other processes. And we feel really strongly about the progress we've made there. And we're excited about this roster. It's looking more and more like what it should look like.
Yeah, I'll say. I mean, the roster is awesome. I mean, and look, we get enamored with playmakers, and you have several of them. It'd be hard for us to go deep into this discussion, though, without talking about Cam Ward and what he brings to your offense. Now, I've loved this kid ever dating back to his time at Incarnate Word. Like, I watched his tape then, loved him at Washington State, did a couple of his games. I do feel like he plays kind of a style that is difficult to defend, but your system that Shannon Dawson's installed is a little bit structure. He wants you to play out of structure from time to time. Sure, when that opportunity presents itself, it does. But Cam Ward's lived out of structure for quite a while. So how do you make sure that his playmaking ability and that ability to improvise and find guys open and scramble drill is highlighted while staying within the confines of an offensive system that is tried and true?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think number one, he's helped us evolve because of you're not limited. You could do a lot of things with him. I mean, he's got a tremendous capacity, super high football IQ, and his ability to improvise is sometimes better than the design play. You know that. I mean, it happens that way. But he's also such a high IQ guy and so systematic that he does play within the system. And if it's not exactly the right call, he can make you right when you're wrong with your call. And that's, whether it be with his feet, whether it be with his arm angles, whether it be with his accuracy or his ability to just improvise. He's really added a lot. But more than that is just that demeanor, demeanor is just different. I mean, he plays quarterback like a linebacker, like a complete general and a guy that's no nonsense, has fun, but plays with an edge. He really, that's the best way to describe it. He is intentional. He has purpose with everything he does, and he plays with an edge.
Well, he's been fun to watch for years, and I can't wait to see him with the supporting cast that he'll have there at Miami. And looking at the run game, too, with the addition of Damian Martinez, like we know that your bread and butter, you want to have a very physical rushing attack. That's who you are. That's what you believe in. And it feels like intentionally have really attracted guys that are in the 220, 215, 230 range that can get downhill and run with a lot of power. How accurate is that? Or do you like versatility at the running back spot? Like, what do you want your running game to look like moving forward?
We like versatility, but we want whether a guy's weighing 180 or 220, that they run really hard. We want to be hard to tackle in the second half, and particularly in the fourth quarter. And to make that a reality, you've got to make sure that you don't have any free hitters, right? You've got to be really dialed in up front, with your line calls and your assignments, understanding leverages, understanding stacks and safety disposition and your keys and your tells, so that because big bodies, they typically take a little bit more to get going. These guys, they can put a foot in the ground and accelerate quickly. And then our guys are maybe not as big. They're explosive playmakers. And we think that combination is really, especially with Cam, who can run really well. Now we're loaded sets. Now we're open sets. Now we're much more diverse. The variety of our run game, continues to increase. And honestly, it helps us evolve. And we end up finding a lot of things. But whether we're in whether it's a 2-man blocking surface or a 6-man blocking surface, we want to be physical. We want to get downhill, even if it starts outside first.
Yeah, it's been really fun to kind of watch the offense evolve, and I know that y'all are just scratching the surface. I'm really bullish on what you guys can be offensively this year. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I know the offensive line took huge strides last year, and that group collectively will be rock solid again this year. I want to move to the defense side of the football and Lance Guidry, who I've just gotten such a kick getting to know him for a while now, Coach. Now you got to give me a story. Now, this dude, he wears his Louisiana roots on his shoulder. Like, that's what he's all about. I think this guy would blitz you in 7-on-7 if he could. He does not care. So help us understand, what was it about his personality that led you to him when you were figuring out who your DC was going to be?
Always wanted to work with Lance Guidry, dating back to when I was coaching at FIU, and he was at Western Kentucky. He got guys to play hard and aggressive and cause a ton of negative plays. They played for him as if every single game was a title game. And then he was very difficult to figure out as well. Disguised his coverages really well. He wasn't going to let you run the ball, but he wasn't going to let you throw it over his head either. It just tremendous balance, but they played with tremendous juice. And I felt that he had answers. And if he chose the wrong call, that his players knew what that weakness of the call was, and they rallied enough to be able to get a guy on the ground and play the next down. I think he's a complete defense coordinator. He's got a lot of experience as a head coach. Phenomenal human being, and he brings a lot of that Cajun juice. You could hear him from across, not the field, you could hear him from across campus.
I would imagine so. I know our meetings with him, I always walked out sweating. Just sitting down and talking a little ball, coach, I'm sweating, man. What the heck did you say that got me fired up? But it always seemed to work. Looking at Rueben Bain and what he accomplished, first of all, I don't know if there's many defensive ends that are true freshmen that are going to come out and just take over the game the way he did so many different times last year. I know he's unique, and I imagine the sky's the limit for his growth and potential in the future. But how rare is it to find a freshman that can impact the game like that at that position in particular?
Oh, they're few and far between, and I think he never took that for granted. I mean, he approached every day like a guy that's hungry and driven. And, I think a guy like that, it's now more so the focus with all the accolades and all the attention he received is to continue to stay focused and really ramp up preparation, ramp up physicality, ramp up your off season, knowing that you're not going to sneak up on anybody. When you line up, you're going to get chipped. You're going to have that tight end stay in, that running back take a shot at you. They're going to slide the protection your way, and you got to be that much better to still be successful and to allow other guys to get freed up as well. So there's plenty of areas in his game that he's fired up to get better at. He's just as good of a human being as he is a player, and he affects others around him. So we're expecting an even better year from Rueben Bain.
And when you look at a situation like Miami, we don't need to tell you what the U is all about. There were times when I was growing up as a 13-year-old kid, I never thought Miami'd lose a game. It's insane to just see the level of dominance, but the expectation is so astronomically high for the program. But you as a former player, I know you embrace it, but at the same time, you can't just get there overnight. There have to be steps taken to get to that point where you can play with that level of consistency. So how have you embraced the expectations, but also acknowledged that we're not going to just flip that switch in year one. We're going to be back to what we were in 2001.
Absolutely. Well, I was spoiled. I was here during those years, and Miami didn't slip up overnight. So getting Miami to be Miami again, doesn't happen overnight, right? Those things, they mirror each other. But all the things you mentioned is a reason why I came back. And part of it is, of course, it's been the lifelong dream, but it's also my obligation. Having played here and having gone away and learned under the very best and been able to apply that and get some great results, it's my obligation, and the one that I really have always wanted and look forward to make sure that Miami establishes those standards and that culture. And mind you, standards and culture are action. Okay? You don't just roll the ball out there and become Michael Irvin, right? It's making sure you're getting those types of players that can be that, and then grinding on the field like those guys did. And those players are doing a great job coming back and explain to our guys what it is to be a Miami Hurricane. Because if you call it what it is before you go beat somebody else, you got to really know who you are. Okay? And I think our team is, through recruiting, through culture, through academics, through us just pounding, doing the right things all the time, we're learning more and more about what it is to be a Miami Hurricane. And our alumni, they're doing – we have the Legends Camp this weekend. They're doing a great